April 2nd, 2025. Frisco, Texas. A day that started like any other spring afternoon. Blue-gray clouds hovered low over Kuykendall Stadium, casting a dull sheen across the rows of aluminum bleachers. The air was thick with anticipation, laughter, and the sharp scent of damp grass as schools from across the region gathered for a competitive track meet. It should have been routine, teenagers stretching, coaches shouting from the sidelines, the distant echo of a starting pistol. But just beneath that ordinary rhythm, something else was moving. Unseen. Unspoken. Among the crowd stood Austin Metcalf. 17. A junior at Memorial High School. Bright, driven, and known for his heart on and off the field. He and his twin brother, Aiden, had come with their team that day, ready to compete, ready to win, ready to go home. They never imagined it would end differently. Because at some point, as rain began to fall and athletes huddled beneath tents, attention ignited, not loudly, not with fireworks, but with the kind of quiet energy that doesn't announce itself until it's too late. What started as a disagreement over something as mundane as shelter from the weather unraveled into something violent, something irreversible. And then chaos. Screams. Blood on the track. A rush of feet. One twin on the ground. The other is desperately trying to hold him together. Coaches dialing 911. Uniformed officers rushing in. Red and blue lights painting the gray afternoon in stuttering flashes. By sundown, one young life was gone. And another was forever changed. In the middle of the commotion, a name surfaced, Karmelo Anthony, a fellow student athlete. A confrontation. A knife. A claim of self-defense. But was it? This is not just the story of a tragedy. It's about the moments that led to it. The questions left behind. And the silence that followed. Because once the sirens faded, something remained in the air and unease. Something that doesn't fade with time. You are about to hear what happened that day and everything that came after. This is Tragedy at the Track, the Austin Metcalf story. The morning of April 2nd, 2025, at Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco, Texas, was marked by overcast skies and the anticipation of a competitive track meet. Athletes from various schools gathered, including 17-year-old Austin Metcalf from Memorial High School and 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony from Centennial High School. As the meet progressed, a rain delay prompted athletes to seek shelter under designated team tents. Karmelo Anthony was reportedly sitting under Memorial High School's tent, an area reserved for their athletes. Austin Metcalf approached Anthony and asked him to move as the space was intended for Memorial's team. Witnesses stated that Anthony responded by reaching into his bag and saying, "Touch me and see what happens." The situation escalated when Metcalf touched Anthony, who then allegedly pulled out a knife and stabbed Metcalf once in the chest before fleeing the scene. Emergency responders arrived promptly, but despite their efforts, Metcalf succumbed to his injuries. Law enforcement officers apprehended Anthony shortly after the incident. According to reports, Anthony admitted to the stabbing, claiming self-defense, and expressed concern for Metcalf's well-being. He was charged with first-degree murder and held on a $1 million bond. This tragic event left the community in shock, mourning the loss of a promising young athlete and grappling with the circumstances that led to such a devastating outcome. Before the headlines. Before the police tape. Before the sorrow spread through Frisco like a silent current, there was just Austin. Austin Metcalf wasn't a name most people outside Memorial High School knew. He didn't seek the spotlight, though it often found him. On the track, he was all grit and grace, legs pounding against the dirt, each stride calculated, honed by repetition. But what made him stand out wasn't just his speed. It was how he carried himself when the race was over. A twin. A brother. A son. A friend. Austin was the kind of young man who remembered names. Who stopped to help underclassmen gather their gear. Who showed up early, not to impress, but because he knew others depended on him. His teachers described him as focused. His classmates were funny in that dry, clever way that didn't always come with youth. His coaches are relentless. But ask his family and they'll tell you something else entirely. That he was their anchor. That in a world that felt like it moved too fast, Austin slowed things down. Made people feel seen. He had plans. College was closed. Track scholarships were being discussed. He talked about sports medicine. About maybe one day working with athletes. But there was more. He liked music. Had a playlist for every mood. He could lose hours sketching sneakers and jersey concepts in his notebook margins. He once told a friend if he could design for Nike, that'd be enough. And that afternoon, he was just trying to get through the meeting. Rain was falling. It had been a long week. He and his brother were ready to run their events, get back on the bus, and head home. They didn't know. When word spread about what had happened, first as whispers among the students, then as confirmed updates from officials, the reaction was immediate and it was raw. Teachers canceled assignments. Counselors were brought in. Practices were paused. There was no script for this. No protocol for a community forced to bury a boy who had only just begun to shape his future. Vigils lit up the night. Track spikes were left at the stadium gates. Teammates wore his number on their sleeves. Entire classrooms fell into silence when his desk sat empty. His twin brother, Aiden, showed up to school days later, quiet but steady, carrying more than anyone his age ever should. And through it all, the same question hung in the air: how? How could this happen in the space meant for competition, encouragement, camaraderie? Austin's story, now marked by tragedy, wasn't supposed to end like this. But those who knew him, those who continue to speak his name, insist it doesn't end here. They refuse to let it. Because Austin Metcalf wasn't just a victim. He was a life lived fully in motion. And in memory, he still runs. In the hours following Austin Metcalf's death, another name began to surface, quietly at first, then rapidly gaining traction: Karmelo Anthony. Not a household name. Not a professional athlete. Just a 17-year-old student from Centennial High School. Another teenager who showed up to the track meet that day expecting to compete. Another young man who likely didn't think his life would be divided into two parts, before the tent and after. Karmelo Anthony was known by teachers as someone who mostly kept to himself. He wasn't a standout star, but he showed up. He participated. He was polite. Teammates said he was quiet, didn't start trouble, didn't seek attention. There was no record of violence. No behavior reports. He had a family who supported him. Friends who vouched for him. A future that, until April 2nd, looked like any other high school junior's, uncertain, maybe, but still in shape. But that day changed everything. According to reports, Karmelo was sitting under Memorial High School's team tent, out of the rain. He wasn't supposed to be there, but maybe he didn't know that. Maybe he did. Witnesses say Austin and his brother approached him, asked him to move. What was exchanged between them varies, depending on who you ask. But one fact isn't debated: when it was over, Austin lay bleeding. And Karmelo was holding a knife. He didn't run far. In fact, police found him nearby. Calm. Cooperative. And when questioned, he told them plainly he was afraid. He claimed he'd warned Austin not to touch him. When Austin put hands on him, he reacted. He said it wasn't murder. It was protection. His legal team echoed that statement. Within days, Karmelo had secured legal representation. Attorneys with experience in high-profile juvenile cases. Their argument: this was not an act of aggression. It was fear. Misjudged, yes, but not planned. Not deliberate. The law, though, doesn't always move with nuance. Karmelo was charged with first-degree murder. No prior offenses. No criminal history. But under Texas law, a murder charge doesn't require premeditation, just intent at the moment the act occurred. Because he is a minor, he is not eligible for the death penalty. Nor can he receive life without parole. But a conviction could still mean decades behind bars. As the case gained attention, Karmelo's family responded with a public statement expressing sorrow for Austin's death while also asking the public not to rush to judgment. A fundraiser was launched to help cover legal costs. It didn't take long for donations to roll in. Thousands of dollars from community members who believed the boy they knew couldn't have done what was being described. That it had to be more complicated than the headlines made it seem. Supporters argue Karmelo was isolated. That he had no prior issues. That something must have triggered a moment of panic. But for every person defending him, there are others demanding accountability. They point to the outcome: one young man dead, another holding the weapon, and ask, where's justice? The courtroom will ultimately decide Karmelo Anthony's future. His story is still being written. And whether it ends in freedom or confinement, the truth, whatever it is, remains entangled in what happened during those few seconds under a gray Texas sky. Seconds that changed two lives. Seconds that no one can take back. The days that followed the stabbing at Kuykendall Stadium were quiet in the way only shock can make a town quiet. People didn't have the words. Some didn't believe what they had just witnessed. Others replayed it over and over in their minds, searching for something, anything, that might explain how a spring afternoon at a high school track meet ended with a teenager bleeding out in his twin brother's arms. Then the silence broke. The charges came swiftly. Karmelo Anthony, 17 years old, was arrested and formally charged with first-degree murder. A charge that, in Texas, carries severe consequences even for a juvenile. His age protected him from the harshest penalties, but if convicted, he could still face decades behind bars. Prosecutors argued that the act was intentional. The knife, they said, was not an accident. The moment was not impulsive. And now the case would play out in court. Karmelo's defense painted a different picture. They claimed self-defense. They said he felt surrounded, threatened. That he warned Austin. That he didn't swing first. That he simply reacted, trying to keep himself from being hurt. Their goal was clear: shift the lens from cold-blooded murder to a moment of overwhelming fear. The legal process began its crawl through hearings, filings, and motions. Each step slow. Each step under a microscope. The public watched, waited, speculated. And outside the courtroom, something else was unfolding. The community split in two. In one half, there was mourning. The kind that sits deep in the chest and doesn't leave for a long time. Austin Metcalf was honored in candlelight vigils. Students wore ribbons. Coaches gave tearful statements. His name was etched into track meet dedications, his image printed on posters and t-shirts. People clung to memories of races run, of jokes told, of a life that was supposed to keep going. In the other half, there was defense. Karmelo's family, his school, his friends, they pushed back against what they felt was a one-sided narrative. A fundraiser to support his legal defense collected donations. Some questioned why he was carrying a knife. Others asked why no one was talking about bullying or confrontation. And somewhere in the middle, between grief and loyalty, stood the truth. Blurred by rumor and warped by online outrage. Social media erupted. Screenshots. Unverified quotes. TikTok theories. It didn't take long for the misinformation to spread. Claims that one student was a known aggressor. Claims that the stabbing was racially motivated. That police were hiding something. That someone else had a weapon. None of it substantiated. But all of it repeated. Authorities responded with carefully worded statements. They urged the public not to speculate. They confirmed that only one suspect had been arrested. That the investigation was ongoing. That everything else, every viral post, every anonymous account, was noise. But the noise didn't stop. People.com and other outlets reported that the Frisco police were working to identify individuals spreading false information. Officials warned that online harassment of witnesses or families could result in legal action. They made it clear there would be no trial by public opinion. Still, the divide widened. In this town, once united by school spirit and Friday night lights, two narratives now ran parallel, each certain of its own truth, each unwilling to fully hear the other. The legal battle is just beginning. But outside the courtroom, in hallways, homes, and timelines, a different fight continues, one for control of the story. And the story is far from over. This isn't just a headline. It's not just another story that fades away when the news cycle moves on. A young life was taken. Another hangs in the balance. And two families now wake up every morning to a reality they never could have imagined. But the questions remain. How did a high school event meant to celebrate strength, unity, and youth end in tragedy? What signs were missed? What systems failed? And most importantly, what can be done to make sure this doesn't happen again? If this story stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. Start conversations. Push for accountability. Support mental health and conflict resolution programs in your schools and communities. Share this video. Keep Austin's story alive. Keep asking questions. Because silence helps no one. And awareness might just save the next life.